Hey everyone, welcome to episode 49. I'm Jennie O'Connor, and I help multi-passionate creatives like you kick overwhelm to the curb and fit all your shiny objects into a life and business you love. I have crazy exciting news for you guys. I am rebranding this show, but not to worry. You'll still get the same great content and the same great guest interviews, but I'm changing the name to make it easier for other multi-passionate creators like you to find it. And I'm gearing it specifically towards folks who want to make a living from one or several of their passions. So it's still here to inspire and educate and help prove to you that you are not alone and you're not doing life wrong. But I'm just going to get a little more specific with the content around designing a lifestyle and especially a business that brings you boatloads of happiness. You're welcome. And if you're wondering what it's going to be called, that's still bubbling around in my brain cauldron, so stay tuned. Today I'm speaking with Teresa Bruni, who is a healer and self-described spiritual warrior who assists individuals in breaking through obstacles that prevent them from living their best lives. But she is and has been many other things, including a certified professional coach, energy leadership master practitioner, international best-selling author, photographer, accountant, and a lot of other things that seemingly don't go together, making her absolutely fascinating. And I cannot wait to peel back the onion here. So let's get to it. Hi, Teresa. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you, Jennie?
I am wonderful. It is so good to see you again and to have you on the show. Thank you for being here.
Well, it's really my honor. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. I'm excited. There's so much good stuff that we're going to get into. You have such a fascinating journey, and I'm really looking forward to diving into it a little bit. Start though by telling me, I'm just so intrigued by this, what a spiritual warrior is.
So a spiritual warrior, first we need to define the difference between religion and spirituality.
Yeah.
So, religion typically has rules that you need to follow. And if you don't follow those rules, then you're not really a part of that religion. Where spirituality breaks away from that. And the only rule to spirituality is the belief that love conquers all. And, that we need to live from the heart. And so as a spiritual warrior, I champion that. And I encourage people to live from the heart, because when you do, it just amplifies your life in every area: health, wealth, relationships, you name it.
Oh, I just love that. I feel like that is something that I try to practice and embody myself. I've just never really had a term for it. And when I read Spiritual Warrior, I was like, that sounds awesome. I need to know more about it.
Yeah.
So thank you. Yeah.
Yeah. And let me add one more piece, because people often misinterpret the word warrior. So it's not like I put my armor on every morning and am ready to go into battle. A warrior really stands in a peaceful stance, and opens the door for what they believe in. Now, if they need to go to war, they're prepared to do that, but their goal is to never have to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is a true warrior.
Yeah, it feels related to those martial arts practices that are about like self-control and peaceful resolution, and like yoga poses that are warrior. I always think of it in context of something far more peaceful, but you're right. I think that there's an entirely different connotation that goes with it as well. But I love that definition. I just think that's really fantastic. So I suspect that you have always known that you were an everything enthusiast. Is that true?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And your journey is going to illustrate that for my audience. But so for those of you listening, I don't always do this. I usually just sort of have a list of questions like pre-prepared, but I would just really love for you, Teresa, to bullet point your journey from wanting to be a teacher as a kid to where you are now, because it is such an amazing illustration of the many twists and turns that a multi-passionate life can take. And then I may stop you as we go and ask some follow-up questions. So beginning with wanting to be a teacher, tell me about your evolution.
I clearly remember as a little girl, when people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would always say, I want to be a teacher. And I remember one Christmas, my sister bought me this chalkboard, and it was on a wooden stand, and it flipped. So it was black on one side and green on the other side. And I used to stand there and pretend like I was a teacher.
So cute.
And then, and then, in high school, I was drawn to the arts. And I spent all my free time. If I had a free period, you would find me in the art room. I was drawing and painting and doing all of that. But my block was that I lacked imagination. I could copy a picture to perfection. So, I guess I could counterfeit, a picture pretty
Sure.
well. But when it came to coming up with my own ideas, I lacked the ability to imagine. But what I knew was when I saw beauty, I could recognize it. And so that pushed me into photography, because that way I could see beauty and capture it in the camera. It wasn't until years later that I discovered I suffered from trauma brain.
So
And
what does that mean exactly?
okay, so oftentimes people who were traumatized in whatever way, and there's so many ways that we can be traumatized, the mind actually loses its inability to imagine. So,
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
So imagine the impact on your life, because all of the great spiritual teachers tell us that, and even Einstein told us, imagination is more important than education. Because when you can imagine it, then you can set out to achieve it. And so all those years, I didn't understand why I lacked imagination until I started to study trauma in my current career. Yeah.
Wow, that is so fascinating, because I never would have made that correlation. And that can start, because I think of children as so much more imaginative as we get older. Somehow that feels like it's a little bit trained out, like curiosity is trained out of us. So I think imagination sort of goes with that. But that could have started for you at such a young age is so interesting. So you then turned to photography, and that did allow you to be creative. Yeah.
Yes. So I graduated from a professional photography school, and I worked in that profession, only to discover that I couldn't make the kind of income that I wanted to make. Back then, photographers didn't make a lot of money. Today, I mean, everybody thinks they're a photographer because they have their cell phone, right? So
Sure.
the market's even more competitive today. And so upon that realization, I was married at the time, and we decided to start our own business. And so my job in that business was, office management, bookkeeping, personnel, all of that kind of thing.
Now, did you have an interest in that, or was that just because that was what needed doing and you were available?
That is what needed doing. And I never, ever imagined that I would be happy in a desk job.
Sure. Yeah. Especially if you were leaning towards teaching and helping and creative things. That's very, very different.
Yeah, that's the whole left brain, right?
Exactly.
Suddenly I flipped from right brain to left brain. And then as my marriage was ending, I stepped out into the corporate world, and I became a senior accountant. So now I'm totally left brained, right? So
yeah,
I'm running mainframe computer systems, accounting systems specifically. And so, that was an incredible journey that I worked in Manhattan. I was lucky enough to work in downtown Manhattan. So that was pretty exciting. And that career lasted for quite some time. And then, as you're familiar with my personal story, I became chronically ill and ended up on disability for 9 years. So then that career came to a halt.
Okay. Now, so question, while you were working in this like entirely left brain pursuit, did you feel the longing for something else?
I really didn't. What I found was that numbers are very creative.
Tell
So
me about that.
yeah, so interestingly, it fed both sides of me.
Really?
Yeah.
It's just, it's for someone who started out wanting to be like a teacher or an artist or perhaps an art teacher, the idea of ending up as an accountant and being satisfied with that is so hard for me to wrap my head around. And you
Well,
felt like it was fulfilling all of the needs for you.
yeah, but it's important to understand that part of my responsibilities were to teach the accounting staff how to use the computer system for input and for proper input and output. So that's where the teacher part came in. So for instance, my first job in Manhattan, I worked with the salespeople and I taught them how to pull up their client list and I taught them how to pull up their gross sales and things like that. And then I worked with the accounts receivable department and taught them how to input the receipts and how to send invoices and things like that. So I was teaching while
Okay.
the teaching aspect was always there. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So that makes a little bit of sense. So I want to get into your illness and what exactly it was, because 9 years is a very long time to be on disability. But I wondered if it was a lack of fulfillment that you felt perhaps initiated the disease in the first place. So I'm curious to hear about how that all happened.
Actually, it was the unresolved trauma that caught up with me.
Okay.
And because another thing that happens to a person who has unresolved trauma, the body gets stuck in fight or flight. And most of us are familiar with fight or flight. We know that when we're under a threat, our body takes over and kicks in. So, if you're a great example is if you're in a near miss car accident, your heart starts beating fast and all these things start happening to your body physically that throws you into the fight or flight response, which is an innate response meant to protect us. But for the traumatized person, they get stuck in fight or flight and they don't know how to get out. And when that happens, it depletes our immune system and eventually we become chronically ill. Now, part of my practice today as a healer, I help people to identify the messages that the body is sending so that we can get to the root of the issue and we can turn off that fight or flight. So that's really what happened, was all that trauma, all that unresolved trauma finally took its toll and my body was responding. I didn't know how to listen. No one teaches us how to do that. Right.
Right.
Not
All
in
the things they
Western.
don't teach us in school that I wish they did. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So, and so I became chronically ill, and it actually took me 2 full years to get a diagnosis. And
So
that was
what was the illness when it was finally diagnosed?
when it was finally diagnosed. It was diagnosed as chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia.
Okay.
And at the time, the government had set up 3 research centers in the United States, one of which was near my home. So I was fortunate enough to get in there. And so I was being treated at a center that was studying this new illness.
Yeah. And so fibromyalgia, I'm not super familiar with it. It's just like really, really painful all the time.
Yeah, it is. It has to do with where the muscles connect to the joints. And so it's joint pain, and it can affect different people in different joints. So some might have chronic neck pain, some might have chronic elbow pain or knee pain. For some people, all their joints ache. And I know firsthand how debilitating pain can be.
Yeah. Wow. So
Yeah.
9 years you dealt with that.
Yeah. Well, for 7 years, because, I'd never been sick before. So I let medical science run the show. And I did whatever they asked me to do. And what happened was I ended up on a pharmaceutical cocktail that it wasn't working out very well. Let's just put it that way.
Oh,
I don't care if your drug use is prescription or non-prescription, it still needs to be monitored. And for me,
sure.
and for me, it wasn't working out very well. So that's when I decided that I needed all of that to stop. And I needed to start finding some answers so that I could get well.
And how did you do? Was that your own research then?
Yeah, it was all my own research. And back then, we're talking about the mid to late 80s. There was no internet. Okay. So most of my research was done in libraries and also at bookstores. I spent a lot of time in bookstores. You know, you could walk into a Barnes and Noble and you could take 4 or 5 books off the shelf and go in the coffee shop and sit down and read them.
Yeah, I remember those days too. That was
Yeah,
kind of a lovely way to spend an afternoon, you
it
know?
was.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So, what did you discover then when you started doing this research? What was the missing piece?
Well, the missing piece was, as I mentioned earlier, that I had unresolved trauma
Okay.
and that needed to be uh, uh, dealt with, faced and dealt with. And it was only through turning within and rediscovering myself and my power that I was able to begin healing. Forgiveness was a big part of it. I had to forgive those who had traumatized me.
Mhm.
I had to forgive myself. I had to rebuild my self-worth, because typically when people are traumatized, and I'm not talking about car accidents, I'm talking about mental, physical, sexual, emotional abuse.
Mhm.
Okay. Typically when a person is traumatized, their self-worth goes down to 0. And that's pretty much where mine was. My self-worth was pretty much 0. Even in my corporate career, I felt like a fraud. You know, I felt like, well, if they find out who I really am, they'll fire me. I won't have a
Mhm.
job.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that plagues a lot of us is that imposter syndrome piece,
Yeah.
but I'm curious how you distinguish between what I feel like is ordinary imposter syndrome that just sort of rides along with you, no matter who you are, even if you're a CEO of a company, and trauma induced feelings of inadequacy. Like how did you suddenly go, oh my gosh, this is the thing, this is why I'm sick? What was there, a particular book or author who how did that process come about for you?
It came about kind of naturally because I can remember the doctors would ask me, what was going on in your life when you got sick? Well, I was going through a very painful divorce, but I wasn't going to tell them that because I didn't believe that my emotions had any connection to what was happening to my physical body. So I was one of the biggest skeptics on the planet. You know, I just knew that my illness had to do with something outside of me, like polluted air or polluted
Sure.
water or food that lacked nutrition. So I was the biggest skeptic of all. But what I discovered was once I started cleaning up my emotional baggage, my body was starting to recover. And so it was like, there's something going on here that I need to recognize.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So
so interesting. Sorry,
yeah, and
continue.
back to the imposter syndrome. It doesn't take much to cause imposter syndrome, and it can take. You know, I have a couple of clients that I've worked with over the past few years, and while we're working together, they suddenly have these aha moments of being shamed in class by a teacher,
Mhm.
being called slow, things like that. It doesn't take much to create imposter syndrome. And, you know, I want to be able to tell anyone who's listening that it's a lot easier to clear up than you may think.
Yeah, that was a question I had for you. say you suppose that you have, I mean, you're aware that you have these traumas in your past and you haven't really, done anything to face them head on. What is step one in that process? Like, did you go to a therapist? How did you start the process of your healing?
So when I knew something was wrong, I was fatigued. At the time, I was incredibly physically strong because I was working out, I was swimming, lifting weights, doing yoga. I mean, my body was strong. And I went to my doctor and asked for a complete physical, and he couldn't find anything wrong. Nothing showed up in the blood work. And, he could feel my muscle strength as he was examining me. So he handed me a prescription and he sent me for stress management. And when I look back, I laugh because I filled the prescription and took the pills. I didn't even know what I was taking. Turns out he gave me an antidepressant, and the stress management was a psychologist. So
Okay.
Okay. So
I wish he would have told you were taking an antidepressant. Like,
yeah,
I feel like that's information you should have.
Well, I know better now.
Right?
Well, I know better now. I research everything, but yeah, he said here to, wrote it. And back then they wrote it on a piece of paper and ripped it off the thingy and handed it to you. And you took it to the pharmacist. And looking back now, in his defense, if you can't find anything, then what do you do with a patient? So to answer your question, I stayed with that psychologist throughout the whole course of my illness. And that was like my safe space.
Mm-hmm.
I can't really say we made leaps and bounds of progress, but I can tell you that I recommend anyone who's struggling with a chronic health condition have someone, a professional, not a friend or a family member,
Sure.
A safe space where you can just say anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I stayed with him for a long time. Again, it was only through being on this chemical cocktail and having pretty much a breakdown because the medications were not mixing very well for me. And that was my epiphany. And that's when I said, something's got to change because it's been 7 years and I don't think they're going to get me well.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. But so you got better. And then what did you do after that?
So when I got better, I wanted to teach.
We returned to the beginning.
Yeah, I wanted to teach people what I had learned. And because I truly believe that anybody can get well. The body is so amazing. It can heal just about anything, and even there are wonderful stories about people diagnosed with terminal conditions who continue to live for years and years and years. But I didn't know how. There were no life coaches back then. I went back to work in 1999. So there were executive coaches, there were corporate coaches, but life coaches were just coming on the scene and people really didn't know about life coaches. And I gave it a lot of thought. Now, I was on disability for a full 9 years. Mm-hmm. So a big chunk of my career was missing. And so I thought, okay, what are you going to do? And I decided I would go back into technology because I had a strong resume. Of course, technology moves at an incredible pace. So I had to go back to school and get retrained. Mm-hmm. And people are going to laugh, and that's okay. You can laugh at me. I'm older than I appear. While I was out sick, somebody went and invented the PC. So there were no more mainframe computers like I had been used to working on. Suddenly I had to learn this new platform known as the personal computer. Mm-hmm. And so my first job back to work, I was an assistant systems administrator and also the learning coordinator. So I set up all the training for the employees of the company. Okay.
So you still were getting that teaching thing fulfilled for yourself.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I had the left brain side. Good. Because I had the computer management.
Yeah.
And I had the right brain. Let me teach, let me be creative and teach.
Yeah. Yeah. So how long did you do that for then?
Well, I wasn't in that job very long because I wanted to learn web development. Web development was I know.
I love it though. I mean, that love of learning is like the theme that underpins all of our journeys. And that's just, you just embody that to a T. So
Yes.
continue.
I call myself a learning junkie.
Yeah, 100%. I am too. I totally get you.
The internet, was coming to the forefront, and what better career for me to integrate both my left and right hemispheres, but web development.
Mm-hmm.
So I took a job working for New Horizons Computer Learning Centers, and they promised me that, if I worked for them, I took a pay cut from my other job, a significant pay cut, but they said, we promise you'll get this web development certification, which was worth the money that I took the pay cut on. And so I did that. And then I started my own business. So I had a web development company and branding company for 9 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. 9 seems to be the magical number in my life, right?
It does. Yeah. So repeating that theme for sure. So that sounds, I mean, I know web development is left brain, but that branding, like that feels very creative. So I love that you just managed to find a way in every single one of these positions to make it utilize both hemispheres of your brain every single time. So I think that for so many of us, and I actually wanted to ask you this question, so I'll just ask you now. Do you think that we just have a need for variety, or that we just have such a strong sense of personal integrity, meaning that we need to care so deeply about what we're doing that we just keep searching for the right thing? Like, I can't decide if it's like, I'm bored only doing one thing, so I have to have a bunch of variety, or I'm just on a mission to find the one thing. Because now we're about to get to what you do now. Now you're good. Now you're where you were always meant to be, right? So do you think it's a combination of both, or one more than the other? What do you think about that?
I think it depends on the person. I really do. I think it depends on the person. So one thing that fascinates me about your audience is they have their fingers into so many things. And I have a friend, I don't know how she keeps up with all that she does. She has like 3 different podcasts. She's into cryptocurrency. She works full-time as a school teacher. And my head spins when I talk to her. I am not able to manage that. Okay. But I think it depends on the person. And it's important for me to note that each one of these careers that you've heard me speak about, I was satisfied at the time. Okay. So I loved my web development company because I was able, designing a website, that's the creative side, making it look pretty. I mean, how do you feel when you landed on a website that's just really well designed and pleasing to the eye? Yeah. So I loved being able to do that for clients. And it was only when, one day I woke up and I said, this isn't fun anymore. And that's when the universe started pushing me into a new direction. And I said, okay, this isn't fun anymore. And I need to love what I do. I can't, I'm just not cut out to go stock shelves. Some people are perfectly content with that, and they find joy in that. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just not me. I have to really have meaning and purpose in my career, or I'm not satisfied. So at that point in my career, I had an experience that I refer to as being put in the universal dryer, and I got tossed around really hard because I said, you know what, I'll just get my real estate license. That's a great way to make money, and I'll just do that. Well, that didn't work out because the universe said, you're not going to do that. And then I tried something else and that didn't work out. And so it was a rough couple of years, and I was beginning to feel lost. And I know how dangerous that is for your health and well-being. So I was just searching around on the internet, and I found this coaching program, and I spoke to them, and I looked at their curriculum, and my intent was not to become a life coach. That was not my intention at all. I was lost and I needed direction. And they said to me, we can guarantee you that if you enroll in this program, your life's going to change. And that's what I needed. I needed a change in my life. So I enrolled, and it was in the very first session. I remember I left the classroom and I was walking back to my hotel room and I was in tears because I was like, oh my God, it all makes sense now. Yeah. Now I'm going to have the skills that I need to take what I learned on that 9-year journey and share it with the people.
I love it. Yeah. It just like, I just got super emotional when you said that, because those lightning bolt moments, those moments where you're like, right now, I am exactly where I am supposed to be, are so profound. And so many of us are just like wandering around waiting for that moment to happen. So it's just like, I'm always just so inspired when I hear that it happened for somebody else, so that's beautiful. You never had the intent to become a life coach, but is that what you would describe yourself as now? You describe yourself as a healer, not so much a life coach.
Yeah, I believe that life coaching for me is more of a skill than a profession. So coaching is an incredibly powerful tool. And I was fortunate enough to graduate from, in my opinion, one of the best schools out there. So plus I'm highly intuitive. So that training, in addition to my intuition when I'm working with clients, is an amazing skill that allows me to help my clients break through. But I have so many tools in my toolbox that I use that's why I don't call myself a coach.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm similarly don't identify with that as a title for myself. Like, I consider myself a course creator. I call myself a facilitator of greatness. I don't know, for whatever reason, it doesn't align for me. And I like that you use healer, because I feel that the end game ends up sort of being the same thing, but there's something just very nurturing in what you are offering as your service. So you like to talk a lot about mindset. Like, that's a very big piece of the work that you do. So I just wanted to dig into that a little. Why is that so important? And how does that, I mean, I know, so trauma affects your physical health, but how can mindset also play a role in that as well?
Mindset plays a role in everything.
Mm-hmm.
And as I've continued, my healing journey has never stopped. I've been healthy since 1999, but I continue to learn more and more about health. So let's talk about the planting of seeds. So let's say you have a chronic health condition and you go to the doctor and the doctor says, here's your diagnosis. And they put that label on you. You've got your label now. And we're sorry, but there's no cure for this illness. Okay. So they just planted a seed in your subconscious mind and in your conscious mind that's probably going to grow. You have the ability to reverse that. So I like to tell people, when medical science tells you there is no cure, it's only because they haven't found one yet. Okay. 100 years ago, we didn't even have antibiotics. So there wasn't a cure for pneumonia or, sinus infections, but they are dealing with science. They are often going off of statistics. But let's get back to mindset. So mindset is really the key to everything. We'll go back to imposter syndrome. If you feel inadequate, or you feel as though you're an imposter and you're going to be found out, that all has to do with mindset. Mm-hmm. Everything in life has to do with mindset. If you're single and you feel that all the good men are taken, that's a mindset limiting belief that's going to prevent you from getting into a good, healthy relationship. Mindset is just the basis of everything.
Yeah, I remember that was so profound for me, that our brain looks for things to corroborate whatever the stories are that we tell ourselves. So if you think that all the men out there, I use that as an example all the time, are unfaithful, you will literally just find the unfaithful men because your brain is like, see, this is
Yep.
true.
Yes.
So it's about it. So is that part of the work that you do, is rewriting those stories that your clients have been telling themselves their entire lives?
Yes, we rewrite the stories, and we also shift the subconscious limiting beliefs. We identify them and we shift them. And there are several ways to do that. You can use hypnosis, biofeedback. There are probably a dozen different ways. I use a process called Psyche, and it's just a quick and effective way to shift subconscious limiting beliefs. And so what I like to do is pull the weeds and then plant beautiful trees and flowers so that they can grow.
Oh, I love that. That's such a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah, I was going to ask you about how do you uproot those beliefs, because if they're subconscious, because for me, I've always journaled. I've journaled my entire life, and I can go back and read my journals and find patterns that are light bulb moments for me, which to my mind is how I've identified a lot of my subconscious beliefs. Now, also, I went to therapy for decades, so I'm a proponent of that as well. But how does Psyche, is it Psyche? Am I saying it right?
Mm-hmm.
How does that work?
Well, first of all, let me answer your first question. How do we define the limiting beliefs?
Mm-hmm.
You can basically just look around at your life, and they'll be pretty evident, self-evident, so to speak. If you have financial difficulties, then more than likely you have some money blocks. If you're really poor at maintaining healthy relationships, then more than likely you've got some subconscious beliefs around that. If you're carrying more weight than you want to carry, chances are there's something going on in your subconscious mind that's preventing you from releasing that weight. So that's the first thing, is to just look around and say, are all the areas of my life the way I want them to be? And if the answer is no, then the next question is why? Why aren't they? And then you start that process. I discovered Psyche about 8 years ago through working with a client. And boy, I wished I had discovered it sooner. So, I had gone through all this work to recover my health, but I knew there was still a piece missing. And then I came across Psyche, and I was right. That for me was the missing piece. It's simple, yet it's specific. And again, it's kind of hard for me to explain how it works, but it's a non-evasive way that we can shift subconscious limiting beliefs in a matter of minutes. It's very powerful.
But it's
very,
not
very
like
powerful.
a hypnosis related.
No.
Interesting.
No.
Okay.
Interestingly, I worked with a client about 2 years ago who had been chronically ill for 30 years. That's a long time.
Ooh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah. Been sick since college. And he asked me, what do you think if I go for hypnotic regression? I said, I think it's a great idea. Anything that might help and not hurt, I'm all for it. And so he would see her on Tuesdays. And so she would regress him, and they would come up with these things. Here's what happened, and here's what you're holding on to that caused this or that. But she didn't do anything with it. So he would see her on Tuesdays and get regressed, and then bring that information to our session on Wednesday. We would set about reversing all of those limiting beliefs.
Yeah. So it's almost modalities needing to work together. I mean, unless is that part of hypnotic regression? Like, should she have been doing more with that?
Well, I can't really, because I didn't have a personal experience with her. There's no way that I can really make a judgment call on that. She was giving him the information that he was searching for. Mm-hmm. So that was good. And healing really does require a well-rounded approach.
That's what I just wonder, if it tends to sort of be several different modalities working together that ultimately give you that holistic wellness that you're seeking.
Exactly.
Yeah, because I know a lot of people who do work that is similar to yours utilize a bunch of different techniques for, pulling out those weeds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I just never heard of Psyche before, which I think is really interesting. You also are a heart math practitioner. Do you still
Yes.
use those modalities as well?
Yes.
What does that
Yes.
mean?
So, the Heart Math Foundation has been around for a very, very long time, and it is all about being centered and living from the heart. Doing a heart-centered meditation is incredibly powerful. It only takes a few minutes to sit and focus and do some focused breathing as if you're breathing in and out of the heart. And it's a form of meditation. You'll get magical answers. It'll calm the nervous system. It'll turn on the healing response. Like I was talking with a client this morning, and when we were younger, they used to tell us that we only used 10% of our brain. The other 90%, they didn't know what it was doing. Well, guess what? That's the subconscious mind. We know that the whole brain is working. Today, we know that the whole brain is working, and it's the subconscious mind that is the other 90% that's really driving the train. We've also been told over the years that the mind controls everything. The mind keeps our heart beating and our blood circulating and our eyes blinking and all of that. And now we know differently from heart math research. They have discovered that the heart sends far more signals to the brain than the opposite way around. So we're starting to realize the power of the heart. Now, I love talking about the Global Consciousness Project, which is run by Princeton University. And HeartMath has teamed up with them. And the Global Consciousness Project has to do with measuring the energy frequencies that come from human consciousness that come off of the planet. So they measure these frequencies from space. And so they could see a dramatic shift in the energy on 9/11. And also when it was announced that Princess Diana had been killed in a car crash. So they could actually measure our emotional frequency, our consciousness that's coming off the planet. Now that's pretty amazing. And so HeartMath has teamed up with Princeton University and the Global Consciousness Project. So anyone that wants to go research that, it's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, I will put that in the show notes for sure, because I have heard there's a meditation app, I want to say, that is like, they do the same thing. They monitor if a bunch of people are meditating at one time, that it creates a measurable effect in the energy that's produced. And it's still sort of an elusive, like my brain is like, I sort of get it. And also I don't, but it's just such a fascinating concept. So I'm definitely looking that up after this interview, and I will drop that in the show notes in case anybody else wants to. I love to ask this question of everyone that I have come on the show. If there was one piece of advice that you could give to your younger self, what do you think that would be?
Wow. I think I would tell her to hold on for the ride. It's going to get pretty bumpy at times, but it's all going to turn out okay.
That's great. Yeah, that's such an important thing to be able to hang on to when you're in the trenches, and I can speak to that myself. That's probably, there's a list of things I would tell my younger self, but that is definitely one of them. Well, before we conclude and I have you tell my audience where they can find you, is there anything else that you would like to add?
I just want every person who is listening to know that they have far more power than they ever realized. And don't settle. Don't settle. Figure out what your values are, live true to your values, and you will see the world open up for you.
I love that. Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. That's fantastic. So tell everybody listening how they can find you if they want to learn more about the stuff that you do.
The easiest way to find me is through my website, which is my name, teresabruni.com. And there is just a ton of information. Of course, I used to be a web developer, so
Yeah.
I've made sure that I've covered everything and that it is organized in an easy to find manner. I have a lot of free resources. I have a recommended reading list. You can request a discovery session if you're interested in learning how we might work together. But just visit me, sign up, get on my mailing list, and keep in touch with me. My goal is to inspire and encourage people to be their very best every day.
I love it. I love a recommended reading list too. I think that that's something that's pretty awesome. And I'm definitely going to check that out as well. So Teresa, thank you. This has been such a joy. And I'm just so appreciative that you would grace me with your presence today. So thank you for being here.
It was my honor and pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. I will talk to you very soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you guys so much for listening to today's episode. If you found this content valuable enough to warrant a tip, you can show your appreciation by visiting buymeacoffee.com/Jennie O'Connor. Or you can show your support by rating and reviewing the show, which helps it get found by other multi-passionates who need to know that they are perfect just the way they are. And speaking of the way we are, do you dream of combining all your loves into a business venture that will make the daily grind less like drudgery and more like play? If so, I'm opening the doors for the Multi-Passionate Master Plan at the beginning of May. In this 6-week group coaching program, you will learn how to prioritize your loves and optimize your time and energy so you can create financial and time freedom that will ultimately allow you to do all the things that call to your heart while making a damn good living at the same time. If you need that in your life, head on over to jennyeoconnor.com/masterplan to jump on the wait list. This step is important, you guys, because folks on the wait list will get exclusive access to the course for more than 40% off. So if you miss out on being notified when I open the doors, you'll miss out on getting a ton of value for a literal steal. So go jump on the list today. Until next time, remember, you are a goddamn unicorn. Now get on out there and do the thing.